Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. In this episode, how to revise your self-talk and revamp your very existence. I think we all feel like we know what self-talk is, yet I think we miss the gravity of it. I'm reminded of the joke where one fish asks another fish, "How's the water?" And the other fish replies, "What the heck is water?" I mean, we were never introduced to our self-talk. It was there since the day we were conceived to varying degrees. We're not necessarily conscious of it. And in this episode, we're going to expand on self-talk to help you conceptualize how it's really your very perception of your life and who you are. So my guest is Marianne Renner. Now, I've gotten to know Marianne really well over the last year. She has an incredible story of not only changing her self-talk, but through it transforming herself in a way that she can't really even recognize the person she used to be. You'll read about her story, hear about it some here. She lost her mom at an early age and was left with a brokenhearted father. And she ultimately fell into addiction. She considered ending her life, even tried. And then had one of those divine moments of clarity. And to me, it was kind of akin to the fish, all of a sudden realizing, holy smokes, I'm in water and doing something about it. Marianne has not just changed her life. She's changed the very essence of the person she is. And she is just thriving. So she has a new book. It's coming out. It's called Self-Talk, 10 Stories You Tell Yourself That Hold You Back and How to Overcome Them. Well, on a personal side note here, one of Marianne's primary mentors in her journey of remaking herself in her life was my father, Dan Miller of 48 Days to the Work and Life You Love fame. He encouraged her to write this book. Well, she did. She completed it right around the time he died. That's when I really got to know Marianne. She had my dad in mind to write the foreword for her book. Well, in his absence, she felt led to ask me to carry on the legacy. So I'm incredibly honored to have written a really heartfelt foreword for Marianne's book, Self-Talk. And I'm honored for multiple reasons, but the top one being, I feel this is a message we all just desperately need. I need it. I think you will hear that you need it as well. And if you go to mariannerenner.com/self-talk, you can actually get the first 3 chapters of the book totally free. So I invite you to join us as we talk about our self-talk. And friends, when I am not doing these shows, I am working with people on their deep fulfillment. That's what I care about. That's what I'm pursuing. That's what you hear me curious about finding here in the show, talking with these guests. And I work with a lot of people on finding that deep purpose in their life and often applying it to their work, in their work or in a business. If that's interesting to you, if you want to connect with me on that, find me at kevinmiller.co. You can also email me at kmiller@kevinmiller.co. Well, coming up next is my conversation with Marianne Renner about our self-talk. Marianne, I so often come into these shows referring to a message and a book, something that came across my desk, caught my attention, or somebody who I was recommended to or, referred to because of their message. And it is a gift. It's been a while, I think, to have somebody on the show who I have known outside of the context of just that. So as much as I'm excited about the book and the topic, I am grateful to have a friend on the show. Thank you.
That means a lot to me, Kevin. I feel the same way. It's an absolute joy to be here in this conversation with you today. Thank you so much.
Well, I'll probably put it in the intro, but if not, I want to make sure it's in here that we met over a year ago. And it was through it was when my dad died. And you had known him for a decade? How long?
Since 2016. So, my
Okay.
gosh, I didn't realize it's almost a decade. Yeah.
Yeah. And you had known him and been a part of his mastermind, been a friend. And obviously you give so much credit to him. It was really fun reading about the impact that he had in your book, which I don't know. I so struggle with often coming on the show with a topic going, okay, like this is the most important thing ever. People are going to get tired of hearing that, like the boy who cried wolf. But as I reread the book again and went through it, and just in my own journey, I don't know that there is anything more important than our self-talk. And I don't think we really understand what that is. You and I talked about that. I mean, Zig Ziglar, I started podcasting with the Ziglar show, and almost a decade ago, not quite, and Zig was known for self-talk, kind of positive affirmations that, with due credit, is, I feel like, a small part of the depth of this. I mean, you got to have a title for a book. It's self-talk, but when you really look at it from a deep level, how do you think of it more as self-belief, self-concept? I mean, how do you define it?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So the book is self-talk, and the subtitle is 10 stories that you tell yourself that hold you back and how to overcome them. And so the stories, I always say it's kind of a process. We start out with thoughts. So we have thoughts and we repeat those thoughts. We tend to repeat the same thoughts over and over, and they become habits. So now we've got habitual thought patterns that's formed these sort of neural pathways in our brain, and it helps us just automate. And because of all of that, then it sort of spits out the other end, as goes through that process as what I call the stories we tell ourselves, and that's our self-talk. Because it goes through that process, our self-talk is largely unconscious.
Okay, stories.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that is difficult for a lot of people to really accept. And I get it. To have something that happened to me that I feel I experienced, and to have it cited as your story, because I find myself wanting to do that in my own awareness and consciousness, to go, for you to tell me about all this thing. And I go, gosh, I hear your story, because I recognize that it is a story. It's not fact. It's not absolute truth. Somebody else, wrote a different story in there. But to have it said to you that what you feel that you have really authentically experienced, those stories are in fact a story that's not an absolute fact. I mean, that is kind of hit on that, because I feel like that's very difficult for people to grasp, especially, and you've experienced this in your life, with kind of traumas, big things.
Yeah. So you're right on the surface, but when I sort of break it down in the framework that I have in the book, it makes more sense. So think of it as there's a situation that would be more of the fact. Let's say it's more data based, it's more fact oriented. It's things like most rational, like people would agree on. But then we tell ourselves a story about that situation. So our story is an interpretation of the situation. It's how we decipher it. I always say it's like a little manufacturing plant. You have the raw material. I used to live in Duluth, Minnesota, and they would mine iron ore out of the ground, the raw material, but then they would take it to the manufacturing plant, and it would go through a process and come out as these little pellets. And so we sort of take the raw material, put it through our process, our mental processor, and then we come out with an interpretation. It's why two siblings growing up in the same household and have the same experience or situation can tell two different stories about it. So it's situation versus what we tell ourselves about the situation.
Well, you said interpretation. That's really my favorite perspective on it. I interpreted it. X happened, and it did. X happened. It was a car wreck, and it happened. But how did I interpret that? What is the meaning I attached? And that's where I get enamored. I was just trading text with Jordan Grummett. I've had Jordan on the show a couple times. He's a medical doctor. And his story, I think he was 9 or 11. I can't remember. His dad died. It was traumatic for him. And the interpretation from a kid, an interpretation, the meaning he attached to it was his fault. It's the most ridiculous thing. I mean, he looks back, he says, I don't even know what the context was, but I decided it was my fault. And from that, I had to become a doctor, which he did, and then realized he didn't really even like doctoring. But it was, to go back that story, it wasn't true. I mean, and anybody would say, of course it wasn't your fault. The guy had a heart attack. I mean, you're a little kid. Yeah. It's not your fault. But the stories, I guess because that one's so exaggerated, it caused me to look back and go, how many how many of my stories that I think is my, I think it
Yeah.
is my life story. I think how many of them did I interpret so, really the word I've been playing with, I'll see what you think is, I mean, not to be negative, but I interpret them immaturely,
Mm.
unaware, unconscious even.
So interesting that you use that word, because most of our stories, these repetitive thought patterns, they use the word belief that does, a belief is a thought we tell ourselves over and over again.
Yeah.
And most of them are formed by the age of 7.
Hmm.
So we tell ourselves stories, and then we develop strategies around those stories. So like, what did you do when you were a child to get your own way? And if it worked, those strategies tend to stay with us for a long, long time. And so a lot of the challenge that we're facing as adults is that we're just using outdated strategies.
Okay. I just talked about this with a group that I was in, and we were talking about self-worth. And one of them was talking about their lifetime of grasping to prove their self-worth because they were told really negative stuff from their father. Well, interestingly, I have the same story of spending so much of my life trying to prove my self-worth to everybody and myself. But it wasn't because I had a father that didn't affirm mine. Mine affirmed mine plenty. He affirmed it so much, I just decided I want as much of that as I can get. And
Yeah.
so I grasp onto it. Different stories, still an outcome though, a similar outcome, and both of them what I would say is an immature, well, actually maybe a better word is insecure. It was an
Mm.
insecure interpretation. I was feeding my insecurity. Would you say that's what changed with you with your own stories as you became more
Yeah.
secure?
Well, my story, so the book, the 10 stories you tell yourself and how to overcome them, it's filled with my own personal story, how I learned about all of this, and tons of tools and lessons. And the way I learned it was I've spent decades overcoming debilitating depression and addiction. So from the time I was 11 years old, that's the first time I remember lying in my bed at night, like crying out to God with tears streaming down my face. God, please let me die in my sleep. And my mom died when I was 9. And after that, it was just sort of struggling, feeling like I was falling off a cliff, trying to get my footing. And it just got worse and worse. And it grew into what doctors eventually called chronic major depression. And then every decision and choice I made after that, Kevin, was just make the bad feelings go away.
Yeah.
And so that became my stories were, why me? Why this? Why God? Why, who's going to take care of me? What's going to happen to me? And so as a child, those might have been very valid, but to continue those stories into adulthood, then they manifested in ways that were not healthy, to your word, immature, because yes, I was a child when they started.
Yeah.
But I spent years and years just trying to make the bad feelings go away. And I tried workaholism, and that didn't work. And I tried alcoholism, and that definitely didn't work. And then ultimately, I read all the books, I did all the research, and I started trying different things. And even though I had really good, sound medical treatment for the diagnosis of depression, nothing came close to what happened after I started to change my self-talk.
Well, and that's where I come back to where I started with. It's hard not to hold this up as the primary thing, at least a primary thing. That is there any treatment that's going to overcome a rooted in self story that is sabotaging?
So here's the good news. Yeah, treatment, like medical, so listen, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to try to play one on the podcast. And I think anybody who has a serious condition needs medical attention. So let me just put that out there. So this is just my story. But what I found is that in the research that I did and the tools that I applied and shared with lots and lots of leadership clients, we can talk about the applications in the workplace in just a minute. But what I found was that we have this neuroplasticity, is what it's called. It's when our brains form, and we have little roadmaps in our brains. but we can change those like forever. We've got this plasticity in our brain. So just like we can work out and change, grow our muscles, we can do the same thing in our brains. And so if we start to practice new habit patterns of new self-talk, new ways of thinking, then we can develop new habit patterns. We can start to experience different outcomes. And so like there's a process. So the situation happens.
Yeah.
Then I tell myself a story. But that story, here's the part that we miss. The story then evokes an emotion. And then the emotion informs the action that we take.
Yeah.
And then we get an outcome. But we don't realize that. We just think, somebody cut me off in traffic and I honked my horn and, now he's giving me the finger. We're like, what's wrong with him? We don't stop and break down that way. But if we want to change the outcome, we have to reverse engineer it. Change the action, change the emotion, change the story, and then we get a whole new outcome. Ultimately that's what we're all looking to achieve.
Okay, well, what you said is, to me, again, it's a root issue. So that the story, well, even that with the emotion, we tend to think, and I have too, that X happens, the stimulus, the whatever thing happens, and it made me feel, this way.
Mm-hmm.
But then to realize that the same thing could happen later on in life and it didn't make me felt that way. I felt something different. Or there's somebody standing next to me, my twin even, and it happened to them and they didn't feel that way. So obviously it wasn't it was me. And what is the part of me? And you just said it. It's the story and the belief, which gets me to, I'm struggling a lot lately with just the topic of belief, which is part of that's one of your chapters is limiting beliefs. And I'll tell you, I think it's going to rub people wrong or be a little uncomfortable, but I'm kind of to the point right now, at least allowing myself to play with not just limiting beliefs, but that beliefs as a conclusive, finite, done thing are by proxy limiting because it doesn't allow me to question, to consider, to even, from a spiritual side, to be aware, to be conscious. If it's done, off the table, then I'm confined to it. What do you think?
I think that what you just said is its own podcast episode. Like I really do. And
that's our part too.
I think that I would love that.
Right.
So where I don't go quite as deep, I'm working with leaders in the workplace. So I'm trying to give them tools that are helping them change their outcomes in real time. So let me give you an example that maybe doesn't go quite as deep, but this is something that's really practical. So let's say, because I hear it almost every day, somebody is in a part of a team and they're an important part of a project. And there's an email invite that goes out and they're not included. Okay. So that's the situation.
Yeah.
But the story they tell themselves, what do you think the story they tell themselves is?
I'm not important enough. I didn't matter. They don't respect me.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Boom. That's the belief system. If somebody doesn't invite me, that must mean that I'm not important. I'm not good enough, which we can get into that story. And so now how do you feel after you tell yourself that story?
Yeah.
Mad, resentful, angry. And then what action might you take as a result?
Oh my gosh, you're going to go and be defensive and maybe try to stick yourself in or blame somebody.
Yes. All the above. Now, so now, and then there's an outcome. There's a result from all of that. And so now maybe everybody else on the team is distancing themselves from you because they don't like that attitude. Maybe they're complaining to the boss about you. Things escalate. And so there are such daily practical applications for this process to say, if I want to, let's say, get promoted in the workplace or be more significant or do, deeper work or find a career that I love or resolve a strained workplace relationship, then I need to change the action. And the only way I can do that is to change the emotion. And the way to do that is to change the story. Like what could be a different interpretation of I didn't get an email that could serve you well?
Okay, let's keep playing with that one. I'm not going to follow the book in order. We're going to jump around because
I like it.
You have one of the chapters is own your role. That one, it sounds so elementary, but I'll tell you, here's how I came into it initially, I'm not going to say that I got it. It's been growing since I got it. It was a counselor a couple years ago who I can't remember what it was. I was citing something that in a relationship that happened that the person did something that I think most people would say that wasn't cool.
Mm-hmm.
But my counselor, thank God, didn't let me off. She says, "Yeah, but Kevin, what role did you play in it?"
Mm.
And there's what you hit on so much with owning your role. So I want to go back to your analogy because so I was left off the email. I feel insecure. Get angry, based on, well, what are the beliefs back here? Is the belief that maybe I'm not that good? Am I struggling with that? If, however, I did know that I did a good job, I felt like I am competent, I know this stuff, why was I left off? Well, it could have just been an error, or maybe I have done something that has not shown my value. I can take ownership of that without being defensive and going and blaming and angry and go, gosh, I realized I was left off. I'm wondering why I wasn't on there. Why was I not included? I'm feeling like maybe I haven't shown myself to be important enough. Yeah, play with that of owning the role in that.
Yeah, that's absolutely owning the role. And so now let's say you changed that story to it was an oversight or something like that. So if it was an oversight, I'm not going to feel so angry and resentful. I'll feel more empowered and maybe walk down the hall or pick up the phone and call that person and say, "Hey, I noticed I was left off, fill me in. What do you?" And they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. It was an oversight." So now maybe the outcome, your action was different. Maybe you show up at that meeting and they give you more grace, or they have a lot of respect for you because they know most people would have gotten angry. So now you've put yourself in a greater leadership position to earn more influence because of the respect that you're gaining. So just changing that story and changing the emotion is going to change your action and change the outcome. Own your role. So here's the thing about own role. And you said, I feel like I wrote this down. You feel like it's elementary. And that's actually the beauty of a lot of the tools and lessons in this book. A lot of it is simple, and that's intentional because I believe simple works. The more complicated you have a tool or a lesson or anything, the less likely you are to follow through on it. But own your role came to me because I found myself sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous 21 years ago. And I was meeting with who eventually became my sponsor. She was an attorney. And she said, "Marianne, I want you to make a list of every person who ever wronged you. Every person in your history." I thought, oh, goody. I was so excited, Kevin. I was like, I was going to get to write my story. Everybody was going to know, all the woes that happened to poor Marianne. And so I came back the next week so excited to show her my list of all those who wronged me, those many years. And she wasn't nearly as excited as I thought she should be. Instead, she said, now for the second part, I'm thinking, well, I mean, what more could there possibly be? And she said, make a list of your role in every situation. And I was not getting it, and I was not feeling it. And I finally ultimately did realize that what she was asking me, because I was thinking, it's not my fault. I'm not to blame for any of this. But she wasn't asking me to assign fault or blame for me or anyone else. And that was actually turned out to be the greatest empowering tool that I've ever had in my life. Because if I'm aware that I have a role to play, that means I get to choose. That is that space. I have a choice. And that was the big aha for me, is that I always have a choice. And that's very empowering for me.
How would you describe, because it's kind of a razor's edge. It's not my fault. And if you're saying, well, I'm not going to let you off the hook with that you had a role, it seems like you're either going to be incredibly threatened, offended, whatever by that, or you said empowered. It's a dramatic. How did that? How would you describe that shift in your own life? Yeah.
Well, it took years and years and years and years. I'm not going to lie. It didn't happen overnight. But once I realized that I have a role, again, okay, that means I can choose. I can choose differently. If I don't believe I have a role, then I'm completely impotent. Like I can't,
Powerless.
yes, completely
Yeah.
powerless. And now I'm going to, again, let's go back to the stories and how is that going to make me feel? It'll drain my energy, increase my anxiety, cause me to stress out, resentful, and that's it. And then it becomes this downward spiral because again, at the end of the day, we're all trying to get a different outcome, or we're trying to get to a certain outcome or a certain place. And so, gosh, now I don't get this meeting invite, or somebody kind of cuts in front of me in traffic, and now I have a choice. It's just it is a game changer once you acknowledge that you have a choice.
If you go back to that incident with your sponsor, do you remember on your list of who's to blame? Do you remember who or whom was the hardest?
Man, probably family, probably my dad.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's got to be some that have got to bring you to the mat on.
Well, honestly, probably hundreds. I mean, this is you can imagine. I was as bad of a case as you could imagine. If you've ever had somebody in your world that you need to work with in any way, shape, or form, and every time you have to pick up the phone or show up with them, you just sort of cringe a little bit.
Yeah.
I was that person in the workplace. And so I would say ex-bosses, ex-boyfriends, family members. God was actually, if I had to pick one, the hardest would have been God.
Well, let me ask it in a different way, because I get literal with these, and I'm thinking about some things, and to say, here's your list of who's to blame. These are people that you have hurt yourself, with. I mean, there's been to varying degrees of, call it trauma or whatever. And then for your sponsor to say, what was your role in that? Now, in that, I'm going to correct me if you don't agree, but I would say it's not that you let them off the hook. I mean, somebody could have really victimized you and you're not letting them off the hook, but you're not, by doing this, you're not going to give them all of your power. Is that true?
Yeah. So within, absolutely. So like even within the AA context, there could have been people that I saw that they did this terrible thing to me. But again, if I play the whole story through, I played a role in maybe a relationship that was dysfunctional or unhealthy or something like that. In some cases, Kevin, the role that I played was holding on to the anger and resentment. So in probably quite a few of those cases, the role that I needed to play or the role that I could change was just letting go of the anger and resentment and confusing that move with letting them off the hook.
Okay. That's why I wanted to ask, because I think that's where it gets, I found myself grappling with that even recently with something, because I was trying to, I have in the past taken the stance that I thought was good of no fault, no blame. And then I'm looking at some things and also had other people share certain things and going, it's really hard not to, I mean, if that person came along in your sleep and sawed your leg off, I mean, they kind of did it. It's kind of their fault. I'm not going to say that they're faultless in this. They had a big role. I don't have a leg anymore.
Yeah.
But I don't want them to have all the power. I don't want that to hurt me every day for the rest of my life. It hurt then.
Right.
So
So in that, so my answer to a lot of your questions is going to be my favorite 2-word answer. It depends.
It depends. Yeah, fair.
So we have to. This is very contextual. So we have to talk about what is the specific situation. So if it's a situation where you have to set boundaries, right? Well, if somebody's coming in there just using me as a punching bag, my role is like, I'm setting boundaries. I'm just going to step out of that relationship. That's my role. Yeah. And so it might be that I need to set healthy boundaries. Maybe I need to walk away from that relationship. Maybe I need to have a heart-to-heart conversation with that person. That's a big one in the workplace is we are offended. And so rather than talking to person and having a heart to heart and figuring it out. We don't. We go into somebody's office, close the door, and then we have this behind the closed door conference where we call it venting, but what we're really doing is just complaining. And so the answer is going to be, it depends on the situation, and we can go into any specific situations, but ultimately it's figuring out what role do you want to play in this situation.
Marianne, I had a 3-hour conversation 2 days ago with a guy I had partnered with in a business. And we're talking at this level. And because I'm thinking back to what you said earlier, beliefs in this relationship. It was a business, but in our relationship together, I had some beliefs just around my own identity, some negative beliefs around that, so conflict averse. And when some things happened that I was upset with him about, my role was I withdrew. I did not go behind closed doors and have a healthy conversation. I did not know how to at the time. And that's my fault too. I was ignorant. I was afraid. And we talked about my role, and I regret it. I always, I will try to redeem it and whatnot, but the role, that's why I was so enamored with this and that concept of it's not my fault. So that's like that's a big red flag. It's not my fault. I mean, another one, and this actually comes before that in the book, that you obviously is a main one for you is, well, the chapter is accept what is, and it's around, it's not fair. It's hard not to feel like we're at the height of, it feels like this is the it's not fair society. I mean, that's, if I want to go to the it's not fair parade, type in any news outlet right now, go onto social media, and it's just everybody screaming about, well, both. It's your fault. It's not my fault. Right. And it's not fair.
Yeah. They play in the same sandbox together, those two.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, it's funny because accept what is one of the earliest chapters. It's kind of the first step. It tends to be one of the last things I talk about when I'm talking to people about the book and the context and the tools, because it is the hardest for people to understand. In fact, people tend to right away misinterpret accept what is. Marianne, are you telling me that I just need to lay down and let someone walk all over me and be a doormat? Or are you telling me if there is a significant social injustice, I should just accept it and be okay with it? And let me be crystal clear that is what I am not saying.
Can I quote Marianne Renner?
Yes.
No, seriously, Marianne, I'm interrupting because I want to read this quote because reading your book again, accepting what is, I have still been struggling with that. And it was after reading your book that I read Eckhart Tolle. I read New Earth. And he talks, he gives a lot about accept what is. And I'm trying to get that, but that has not been my life. My life has been kind of rebellion. I'm no way in heck am I accepting that. And here's your quote in the book, page 27, actually. It doesn't mean doing nothing, as to what you said a second ago, but accepting where you are while on your way to where you're going. That was maybe the most helpful statement to accepting what is that I've seen, because it was kind of like the therapist taking the emotion and telling me a negative emotion and saying, Kevin, just sit in it. Don't run, just sit in it. I'm going, okay. This doesn't help at all. It doesn't help. And so the accepting what is has been a struggle. And I think your statement there is one of the other tattoos I need on my arm.
Wow. I'm very honored. Wow. Yeah. So, and it's a tough one, I used to have this cat. She was my best friend for almost 21 years. And one day she was getting in this gift wrapping and bag that I had, and she got all tangled up in this ribbon. And I thought, it was all around her neck and it was loose. And I just thought I just have to take that off her neck so she's okay. But she kept squirming and clawing and, writhing around. And the more she squirmed, like she wouldn't let me near her. And the more she, struggled, the tighter it was getting. And all she had to do is just sort of relax. Then I was going to take it off, but eventually everything turned out okay. But where you get in this state, we're resisting of what's going on, to the point where we're saying, I hate it, that I can't stand it, that, and we're sort of, getting all frothed up and so much emotion, and we're getting all hot and under the collar, and we don't have the mental energy that we need to take the best action, to make the best choices that are actually going to move us forward. Can't do that until we just sort of chill out, let some things go. Then we can look at the situation more clearly and take a better action. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And your first step in there, you just mentioned resistance, and your first step in this segment on accepting what is awareness. Mm-hmm. And in my own notes, I wrote, what jumped out, awareness that we are resisting. Mm-hmm. I mean, on one hand, I want to say I've known that has been me. I mean, I think of myself, but we're back to beliefs, as rebelling against certain things. And I'm okay with that role to some degree, but the resisting, honestly, Marianne, I had two friends, my brother and a close friend, in the past year. I wish it wasn't that recent. I wish it was longer ago, but call me out on resisting, that I'm resisting. And it was still just hard to understand. And then I'm focused on it. And I love what you said. Now you can also watch out for resisting. Like, well, crap. Because then I think I'm doing that too. And, and of course, that's why your next step under that is just breathe, Kevin. Just like a cat, just stop fighting.
Yeah. Emotion, so emotion is like a 6-ton elephant. We're like a rider, like we're riding, let's say if we're riding on a big elephant, we're riding through the jungle, and the elephant's going the way we want him to go, and everything's going great. Well, the rider represents the rational part of our brain, and the elephant represents the emotional part of our brain, and everything's fine when they're going together. But if the elephant decides at any time he wants to go a different direction than the rider wants him to go, who's going to win that battle?
Yeah.
And that's what happens with our emotions. And so that breathing that you mentioned, that is a great way to change, like let go of that emotion, change that emotion in the moment so that you can let go and you can accept. I just met with 50 government leaders a couple of weeks ago, and we did box breathing together. Do you know what this is? The Navy SEALs do this. Breathe into the count of 4, hold it to the count of 4, and exhale to the count of 4. And we did it together as a group. And prior to starting, I said, I want you to notice how you feel before we breathe. And then on a scale of 1 to 5, how different do you feel after we do 3 deep breaths this way? And all across the room, 4, 5, I mean, in less than 60 seconds, people literally felt differently. So that's such a great, simple, practical tool to get yourself out of any situation where that elephant is charging down a runway that you don't really want to go down.
Yeah, that was one of my primary tools through a time of anxiety, through a time of even kind of coming into my own emotional awareness. And it was that. And I'm thinking about it now, lowering my shoulders.
Yeah.
Lower my shoulders.
Me too.
And do the breath. Okay. You just mentioned emotion. I love the analogy of the elephant. And I want to go back to what you said, that the emotion doesn't come from the stimulus so much. I mean, the stimulus may be a catalyst, but the emotion that I'm feeling is coming from a belief. We're back to those come from my self-talk, my stories. And that's the hope here. That's the grand opportunity, is to look back. So if we're looking at this consistent pathological emotion that we're dealing with, I want people, including me, to hear that is coming from a belief. That is coming from something back here. It's not coming from that thing out here. It's coming from me.
Yes.
And it's coming from a belief. And I think that we, including me, have spent so much time just not questioning my beliefs, some degree, just being ignorant of them. The beliefs, like you said, that I picked up back here when I was 7 years old or prior to that, a belief. And I'm going forward in life. And now I'm 54 years old, and I may be a rock star over here in the spectrum of beliefs, and I'm benefiting from that. And then I've got one. I had a guy tell me, it's probably been a decade ago. He says, Kevin, man, I think, you're smart, brilliant dude. But it was in an area of rebellion. He says, you're like 15. I think you remind me of 15. And man, it really hit me like a ton of bricks because I related it to something that happened when I was 15.
Wow.
And I still feel like that. That's the constant.
What a gift that he gave you. I mean, really.
Jerk, but yeah.
I know. Hey, none of this is fun. I'm not trying to pretend it's fun.
Well, it just again comes back to how I think unaware. That's the thing that gets me with the self-talk is that I feel like overall we just don't realize it. We just don't, and we don't realize that it's going on, and we don't realize that we are believing it. It's really daunting, honestly, when we unpack it there. If it's elementary, it's also the most profound thing ever. I guess it's like the common sense. It's not common. We are so unaware.
Yeah. We're unaware, up depending on the research, and there's all different kinds, but the highest number that I found is in the book is that up to 95% of what we do all day long, do and think, is habitual. Now, a lot of it kind of goes from about 45%, and there's a range there. But here's the good news. And, so when we're thinking about the thoughts that we're unaware of, this is part of the reason why. And so people will say, Marianne, if I'm unaware, then how do I know? Like, how can I change it? And one of the, a lot of people have a hard time identifying their feelings. Like if I ask people, tell me an emotion, what are you feeling right now? I'll say this to my individual coaching clients, and they give me a thought. I said, that's not a feeling. Give me a feeling. That's a thought. But people have a hard time identifying their feelings. So here's what I say. Notice your body. It's easier for us to say, my heart is racing, my face feels hot, my chest feels tight. And so use all of those symptoms as alarm signals that are telling you to take an action. Just like if my alarm clock goes off in the morning, it's telling me to take an action. In that case, wake up. It's time to get up. So if you have all of these alarm bells going off physically, use those as an indicator that it's time for you to take an action. And that helps that's what creates that awareness. It sort of cracks the door open.
Well, your statement there on the emotions, Marianne, 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago in counseling during an intense time, and that question would be asked to me, and my answer is just, I don't know. I just don't know. What's the emotion? Bad. I just don't know.
Yes.
Which is why they prescribed Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart and the 87 emotions. I know. And I literally, I pulled it out.
Yeah.
I'm maybe once a month at this point, maybe not quite that often, but I pull it out. But it was studying. It was going through that, studying and going, I had no idea. Yeah. I read, I would have never even aligned with the word. It wouldn't have caught my mind at all. But then when I read about humiliation, oh my gosh, I realized that's a lot of my emotions. When I feel threatened about how I care or take care of somebody and whatnot, and they cite back that they don't feel cared for, I feel humiliated. I had no idea. I had to go learn. This is back to the emotional intelligence aspect. I had to learn that. But even then, back when I was learning that, I still didn't unless I missed it from Brené's book, I still didn't get the connection to a belief though. I still, that was later. I feel like I'm within that right now. And so reading yours, that still comes from a belief. So getting in tune with the emotion, I think is good, but then to go, why is that? Why do you have imposter syndrome? Why do you keep feeling that?
Yeah. I think so here's my research. It's informal. It's not peer reviewed, but out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of conversations one-on-one that I've had with coaching clients, leaders, and this seems to increase the higher up they go, is some form of I'm not good enough. And they so nobody would admit this at a networking event, but in the safe, confidential space of one-on-one coaching, they're kind of like, Marianne, I have this deep, dark secret. I can't let anyone know. I can't tell anyone this. And it's a variation of that. They're not always saying I'm not good enough. Sometimes they are. but like they can't let anyone know. And I want to shake them and say, I've already heard these exact words 10 times today.
Yeah.
It's everyone has it. And so I don't know what the belief or the emotion is. It's I'm not good enough. I have shame around the fact that I can't take care of people or whatever the case may be. And then here's why this is so important and so damaging, because we keep it inside like it's this deep, dark secret and we're so shamed about it or humiliated. It shows up in the workplace. We think we're hiding it, but we're not, because leaders are showing up. And this is what ends up happening: gossip, criticism, judgment of other people, judgment of yourself, dysfunction, toxicity in the workplace. So we talk about all of those things. Well, the workplace is, I'm in a toxic workplace and there's so much dysfunction, but we don't want to talk about the F word, our feelings. And that's really where all this is coming from. And so that's why I've been able to create the content here to bring into the workplace. And you don't have to have like a big therapy session at work, but you have to understand these things are coming from your emotions, your feelings. And so that you can have that awareness, so you can start to change the story.
I don't know why it came to mind, but I as you talk about the proliferation of, let's call it imposter syndrome for, I wonder if that has, what do you think in our non-peer reviewed research here, what relation that has to, I don't know if it's to narcissism or to the focus of narcissism. I think it's way overused. And I think now if somebody is kind of confident in themselves, they're easily chalked off as a narcissist. But I wonder, is that more of a topic right now because more and more people are feeling the opposite? They're feeling, like impossible, like nobody's worthwhile.
Yeah, I think, in my experience, even people that show up in the workplace as overconfident or arrogant, they're struggling from the same things. That's just manifesting outwardly differently.
Yeah. If we look at this, so you have the chapter in the book, Act As If, and it's the I'm not good enough. And we look at this issue, I keep coming back to the issue of self-worth, and that it's one thing to attribute that to I'm trying to prove my self-worth to whoever, to everyone out here. The thing that's gotten to me recently, and that I've been talking with some folks about, is realizing how much of that pursuit of proving the self-worth is just to me. Back to, I have these, again, beliefs that have gotten in there somewhere that say I'm not good enough. Or again, I didn't have those messages as a kid. Those were not mine were you're more than good enough. You're actually king of the world. And my parents,
yes, I do.
Self-meaning. We've talked about this openly. That I grasp onto that and just I want more of that, and I put it to a performance-based thing. I still didn't leave myself the place to go, I'm okay regardless, just period. Yeah. And so I'm trying to prove my own self-worth, and that was the never-ending pursuit that I continued until I burnt out from it, which I'm sure you see in the workplace, especially. I mean, that's what we hear about is burnout.
Yeah. There's like several things I want to say to that. So I just want to trying to pick one at a time. So a belief, as you're talking about belief, a belief is a thought that we think over and over. Yeah. So we can change our beliefs by, changing the story and then putting it on repeat. But what I tell people when they're stuck in those places of I'm not good enough, and sometimes this is how it shows up. They're not saying I'm not good enough, but they're saying I'm too young. I could never step into that role. I'm too old. I could never do that role. I don't have the right degree. That one, if I heard it once, I heard it 1,000 times. I had a client, she's in the book, Elizabeth. She didn't have the same degree as everyone around her. And she thought she could never amount to anything. And she was going to leave her job and become a house cleaner. So I'm just going to go clean houses. And she ended up being the CEO in her role. So you don't need a degree. I'm just telling everybody who's listening. But what people, when they're struggling, I always say you're telling stories about the past, the present, and the future. So that's what you're doing. And the past shows up as all the reasons that I messed up Like they're looking at all this evidence. I blew up at the kids yesterday. I dropped the ball on an important project at work. I missed a deadline. And that's all they focus on. One thing that they maybe did wrong or not to their liking yesterday. So I say just start journaling and celebrate your wins from yesterday. So rewrite the story of your past with celebration, and don't self-edit. Right. So someone might say, well, I got the kids out the door on time, but that's no big deal. Don't self-edit. Okay. So that's number one. Rewrite the stories of the past with celebration. Rewrite the stories of the present with appreciation, because we're saying, I don't like my job. I don't like my boss. I don't like my neighbors. Right. Okay. Let's write down 3 things you're grateful for every single day, because now we just have to start rewriting our present, because what we focus on expands and we're going to get what we expect. So that's number 2. And number 3, people are writing stories about their future. They're just saying, I'll never get the job I want. I'll never be happy. I'll never find I'll never, right? They're just, so I tell them to write an affirmation that serves them well. And here's the thing, people kind of roll their eyes at affirmations and think of Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live. Gosh darn it, I'm not good enough. But we're already telling affirmations. We're already saying, I'll never get that job. We're already saying, I'm never going to find happiness. We're already telling affirmations. We just seem to be doing it in a way that works against us. And for some reason, we're super comfortable with that kind of affirmation.
I love that. So right now, tell yourself positive affirmations, is what you're saying, is because you're currently just telling yourself negative ones. So you're telling the affirmations happening.
Yes.
It was back with Zig Ziglar and the self-talk, of course he has his literal cards, and it's I think that's a lot of where the Stuart Smalley, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. Love that whole thing. But, so Zig, he had similar ones to that. And I remember he had one, I don't know, you go down through, I'm this. He had one, I am punctual. I'm supposed to look in the mirror and say, I am punctual. Kevin, you're lying out of your teeth. You are not. But I had to, for me, I took it and changed it to I am becoming, if I wanted to, I am becoming punctual. I'm becoming patient behind people who drive in the left lane very slow. Because I'm not today, dang it. I don't even know if I want to be. But so I started looking at them as prophecies. I prophesy myself, because right now I'm stating a belief that I'm becoming the expectation, negative or positive.
Okay, so I got a little trick, because this is really good stuff, and I think it's in the chapter around limiting beliefs, and I think it's in the book as an activity. So you're right. So there's this thing, that our brains have called cognitive dissonance, and you may be familiar with that. Basically, if we're trying to think of 2 opposing thoughts, it's very uncomfortable for our brains, so we kick one out. So we're going to hold on to the one we're most comfortable with. So if you your belief is I'm not punctual, and you want to look in the mirror and say I'm punctual, it's not going to work. It's very hard to do that. So there's a third step. So take the old story you're telling yourself, the new story you want to believe, and then the third step is, where can you find evidence, real evidence in your life that support that new belief of being punctual? Have you ever in your life been punctual? Have you ever showed up anywhere on time? Write that down, because now your brain can hold on to that. Now your brain's not trying to kick that out as, but it's not true. Why would I'm never going to, well, it is true. Because there are times I've done it before, and all I have to do is keep growing in that area. So that's kind of how we make the leap from the one to the other.
Well, and you got the opportunity to do it. I haven't been punctual, but tomorrow I'm going to be, and I do it. And I show up twice, and now I am punctual, which I actually am making fun of that.
You showed up here on time.
I have become, it's an interesting topic, because as I have grown into myself and my own awareness, I am much more punctual. I didn't used to be, and I had so much anxiety and coming at the last minute, and I just got tired of the anxiety. So now I am more punctual with that. I want to, there's a couple big points I don't want to miss that And you just reminded me of it again. We keep coming back to beliefs so often, and which we're in essence saying, I mean, or are you your self-talk comes from current beliefs. If you want to change your self-talk, you have to change your beliefs. Does that hold? Does that statement hold?
If a belief is, I mean, this is just, kind of my approach to it. But if a belief is a thought that you tell yourself over and over, it becomes a belief. So if you want to change your beliefs, you just need to not just change the thought one time, but then repeat it over and over, over and over. You're just doing the same thing, following the same process that helped you form the belief to begin with.
Okay. So then with that too, another thing that really floors me in essence too is looking at my beliefs. And I come from, well, again, like you and a lot of our listeners, coming from a pretty religious background. I mean, our beliefs were absolute truth. And now as I look at the majority of the beliefs that then pattern my self-talk and my emotions, whatever, I'm looking and realizing that the vast majority of them, if not almost all, are subjective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is for me and for the listeners and the people that are trying to again, they're just trying to change the outcomes of their lives. And I say, so we talked about, you have the situation and then you have the interpretation. Mm-hmm. So if everything is an interpretation, which, we've had that conversation before, that's okay. Make it a good one. If you're going to tell yourself a story, just make it a good one. Make it one that serves you and the greater good of all. I'm not saying we should not have beliefs. I'm not saying we shouldn't have stories. I'm saying if you're stuck, you're struggling with constant chronic negativity and unhappiness and unfulfillment, then let's just change your stories into stories that are going to serve you as well as the greater good of all.
Okay. That to me is a holy grail concept. I mean, when we look at the interpretation, again, the thing happened. Let's go ahead and take something bad. Mm-hmm. With a car wreck. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's, what's the interpretation? Well, I think anybody would say, kind mm-hmm. of a bummer, kind of a bad mm-hmm. thing. But how many people have had, I've actually talked to some people recently really around car wrecks. It's almost gotten me interested in researching car wrecks and what mm-hmm. it does to us or to a lot of people psychologically. It is such a violence and a violation sometimes mm-hmm. to people's security that I keep hearing so many of these life changes, often, negative issues around a car wreck. It was far greater than any physical issue. It was the psychological. And I'm thinking about the interpretation. So the car wreck happened. Maybe they had an injury. That's the objective truth. That's it. But then what was the interpretation? And mm-hmm. I know one person in particular who took it and it annihilated her mm-hmm. because it was kind of the culmination of life. Here she was trying to do the right thing. And in this instance, she had done the right thing. She mm-hmm. was driving the appropriate way. It was in a snowstorm and she did the right things and she got hit anyways. Mm-hmm. And her interpretation rocked her faith that anything was good, that she's mm-hmm. just unlucky, that God's out to get her. That was an interpretation. It's not a truth. It's just a subjective, whereas somebody else could have gone and made the word I've been using is what would be a constructive interpretation. Could there be? And now play with that because mm-hmm. you're saying, and you have in so many ways, it's not just a positive thinking. It's not just a Pollyanna pain. Right. I mean, it's a car wreck. It's terrible. Right. But what's the ongoing interpretation?
So like in my example, my mom died when I was 9. Am I going to sit here and say that was a good thing? I'm glad that happened. No, I'm not. But here's what, for years I did not, and I said the opposite. But here's what I do say. Had my whole life story not happened, I would not be here with you right now. I would not have written this book. I probably wouldn't have met your dad, one of the most influential people in my entire life. So that's the story that I'm telling myself and that I'm focusing on. And again, there's a phenomenon called the expectancy theory. Whatever we're focused on, more of that tends to show up for us. And so the more I focus on doing things that help other people, that feed my soul, that just continues to grow and grow and grow. So it's where I'm choosing to place my focus mm-hmm. and the story that I want to tell and focus on. I'm not going to go back and never say, "Oh, it's a good thing my mom died." But what story do I want to tell that's going to serve me and the greater good of all?
Well, okay, I'm still enamored with that, and your stat on that. So many of our beliefs happened before or by 7 years old and whatnot. Because in this current, I'm going to call it my own awareness as I grow in this,
Yeah.
and talk about something in the past, especially far in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also kind of looking at it and going, okay, that I have evolved a lot. My
Mm-hmm.
perception has evolved a lot. My beliefs have evolved a lot. So you're asking me about a story about what happened back whenever, whether it was 5 years ago or 50 years ago. I go, well, the best I can remember at this
Mm-hmm.
point, I don't know how many variations of the story are there. I had something happened. I had probably an immature, insecure interpretation as a kid, as a youth,
Mm-hmm.
as a young man, whatever. And how many different variations? I don't even know how to describe what happened back then. I think I hurt myself by feeling it was kind of along this way, but we're telling stories of stories of stories when it goes to the past. And yet for you to point out that so many of those are foundational to what we believe and how we are talking and emoting today
Yeah.
is
Well,
tremendous.
and part of the reason that they're formed at such an early age, that's just when we have that neuroplasticity in our brains. That's when our brains are most, pliable. At newborn, at birth, around age 7, and again at adolescence. So that's the reason. I mean, and for all the way it happens, at the end of the day, and see if I can just kind of simplifying this just for people to kind of grasp and apply. I want people to apply some of this like immediately as they're listening to it. What are you doing that's producing the outcomes that are producing that you don't like? And let's just tell some different stories to help you get the outcome that you do want. I mean, it's really that simple. Easy, maybe not, but simple, yes.
Okay, let me ask you this. As I've been playing with this concept of retelling stories, which my experience is a lot of people feel like it's not authentic.
Hmm.
That what they felt, it initially happened, this is how they
Yeah.
felt, that was authentic, and now they're just trying to again
Yeah.
repaint it, which is why I'm enamored with this idea of going back and going, okay, what if the initial story I told was wrong? It was just wrong. So I'm not repainting it, I'm correcting it.
Hmm.
Thoughts?
Well, yes, and
You can push
so
back on it. I'm
well,
playing with it.
I think it's a matter of context, and so I'm focused more on where do we have chronic, repetitive thought patterns that just make us feel like crud.
Yeah.
Where are we complaining all the time? Where are we just sort of, doomsday all the time? Like where do we have patterns in our lives that are just keeping us stuck like an old tennis shoe that's just spinning around in a clothes dryer over and over and over and we're not getting anywhere. That might be a little bit of a different context than what you're talking about, like something significant happened to me and how did I interpret it?
That's fair. Because you're coming out with, okay, but what is the belief? And it's banging around there
Mhm.
that we need to alter. Yeah, as you were talking a minute ago, I thought, I mean, we're all aware of, like the concept of annual goals. I mean, we've got
Mhm.
New Year's resolution, whatever.
Mhm.
That I feel like at this point, I want to do an annual, if not sooner, but an annual belief
Yeah, I
audit.
love that.
An annual belief audit.
Uh-huh.
I think what for most of us too, as I even think about that for myself, an annual belief audit,
Mhm.
I'd have to go and go, I'm not, how many of my beliefs am I even aware of? How
Yeah.
many of them? I do wonder about that. I don't even
Yeah.
know. You can help. Won't you help me with that? How do we
Well,
figure it out?
so yeah, again, so I'm gonna kind of keep going back to,
Please.
let's say example, I have a client, a leader, they come to me and they're really stuck. Something they're showing up and they're saying, yeah, I mean, as much as I don't know if I want to admit it, it's almost always a strained workplace relationship.
Hmm.
It's like somebody is causing this big problem for me and I don't know what to do about it. My boss is sucking the life energy out of me, whatever. And so then then we're looking at, okay, what is it that you're telling yourself about that situation that's keeping you stuck? I'm not sure the goal, at least in the context that I'm working with people, is we want to unpack all of your beliefs and we want to lay them all out and see which ones are accurate and which ones aren't. No, we just want to figure out like what's the one or two, usually it's one or two big ones that you're telling yourself over and over that's keeping you in this situation and not helping you get out of it or resolve it or move on.
That we're hurting ourselves. So we're back to limiting beliefs and just the patterns. What are the patterns that are not working out?
Yeah.
Are not,
yeah.
Which is what your higher, I mean, is that the majority of you? Would you say that that's what the majority of a lot of your coaching comes down to, your personal coaching?
Big time. So people come to me, the surface level problem is I'm unfulfilled in my work. I've got a strained workplace relationship. I can't get promoted. All right, great. Like sometimes we'll say, can you help me with my interview skills? Can you help me with my leadership skills? Yeah, I can. But let me ask you a few questions first. And as we start to peel away the layers of the onion, there's something inside. That's the root problem. That's the real issue going on. It's just sort of manifesting up here. And I'll say, listen, I can help you with your interview skills. I can help you with your communication skills and how to lead a meeting. But what if we went a little bit deeper, talked about some mindset things? I heard you say, I just kind of pick up on these little kind of belief related comments. What if we went there? And when we go there, all the other problems go away.
So symptoms and root is what you keep coming back to. So here you are, which is interesting to say, okay, you've been doing speaking and coaching and consulting and whatnot for a decade?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what's the book that you come out with? It wasn't on speaking or leadership skills.
That's right.
It was on what you end up working people. It was on the root issue.
So I love this. So I'm so glad that you went here because it was really hard for me, right? And I had a leader of an organization say, "Oh, you've got a new book coming out. We can bring it into the organization." And I said, "Okay, yes." And it's a yes, and it's personal development. But it's for the professional, like it's for high performers, high achievers, because the higher people go, it seems like the more they struggle with self-talk. And so she said, "Oh, well, I don't know about that." But it really is the root. I mean, this really is, this is why we have so much chaos, because we're not talking about the root. We're just talking about the symptoms and nothing ever really goes away. It's like in my yard in the springtime, if it's covered with dandelions, I can take the lawnmower out and mow them down and they're gone. But a week later, they're right back because I didn't get the root.
Okay, well, along with this, then I want to share the testimony that I know from you, because what you just said. So here you come along. So you're in let's call it the professional development world, and what you come out with, this opus, this work here, is a personal development thing that you shared that with me, that you were almost had a little trepidation initially. Like, it's just gonna personal development that are professional, they're gonna expect that, and this is kind of a professional or personal.
A lot of trepidation.
And as you've done that, like really fast, your business has exploded.
Yes. I was terrified to put this. I mean, listen, I am putting out for the whole world to see my story about struggling with depression and addiction. Now, the book is not about how to overcome depression and addiction. It's just, I'm explaining how I came to learn all of the tools that are helping, thousands of people in the workplace. But yes, it was very hard to write. And I just did this workshop on self-talk for these government leaders. And I wrapped up at the very end. I said, "Hey, can I tell you guys a story? Can I share a story with you all?" Their eyes got real big. Yes. I said, "It's personal. Is that okay?" Their eyes got real big. Yes. And just audibly, yes. And after we did this 2-hour workshop on self-talk, the feedback was phenomenal. When can we do this again? When can we do a 2.0? When can we go deeper in this? It became very evident to me that people, especially in the workplace, are starving to have these kinds of conversations because everyone feels it on the inside, but they go to work and pretend that doesn't exist. And they pretend it's like we have a personal hat. We drive to work and we pull into the parking lot and we take off our personal hat and set it next to us on the seat, put on our professional hat. And then we go inside like we're two different people. but
Yeah.
we're not, because we all have a 6-ton elephant, and that's our emotional side, and we all have the rational side. And if we're not talking about this, no wonder we're showing up and feeling empty and miserable and stressed and anxious.
What would you say, is it fair to ask, even as you are labeled or have been as, professional, you work with professional development, you coach and
Yep.
consult and speak and
Mm-hmm.
and that in your work, especially when it gets, on an individual level, how much of the resources, help that you give to a client, in essence, would be cashed in the professional
Yeah.
development category as opposed to professional or personal?
Great question. It's a both and.
Okay.
So because, okay, let's say I liken it to building a house. Okay. Now, if I'm going to build a house, I'm doing it like, oh, I want to have nice granite countertops. I want to have a master suite with a whirlpool tub. And of course, that's why we want to have a really cool house. But if we don't have a solid foundation, it doesn't matter. It's all going to come crumbling down. So the mindset work, the self-talk work, as you said, that's the foundation. That's the root of everything. So we have to do that. And then we get to build all the upstairs. Like we're having all the conversations, how to have a difficult conversation, how to lead versus manage. What does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to be a good manager? What does it mean to inspire your teams? So all of that is happening. But we have to do this other stuff as well.
The foundation. You and I talked about that recently on a call together. And even I have come back to thinking about how often that, I just want the quick solution. Just help me. We talked about a tree. Help me paint the leaves.
Yeah,
exactly. I need a
exactly.
different color. I need to speak more effectively and sell, get a better sales results, whatever. And we don't deal with the root issue, back to self-talk and belief. With the topic of self-talk, I found myself wondering, where do we miss it? Where do we miss the gravity of it, or the root of self-talk? Is it, 'cause I mean, it's really easy to go, oh yeah, that's positive thinking, positive talk stuff.
That's where we miss it. So where we miss it is, especially in the workplace, it's like, oh, that's hooey, that's hokey, that's soft and squishy. That's not serious. We can't take it seriously. Like, we're professionals in the workplace. We can't be talking about that kind of stuff. So I think we discount it as being not important. That's number one. Number two, and this is more of a hunch that I have, we're afraid to face it. So I have a friend, used to be in the mastermind, in your dad's mastermind with me, was a very high performing, high level leader at a huge national company. And he used to say, emotions. I don't want to talk about emotions at work. Like, the workplace isn't a place to be talking about feelings. And I'm like, man, you could pretend that all day long, and you're just going to continue to have problem after problem after problem with your teams. So we say, we talk about this all the time. I want to raise engagement scores. Like, this is kind of what set me on this path in the workplace, was listening to leaders, high level leaders, talk behind closed doors. And I'd be in those meetings, talk about, we've got to raise engagement scores. We've got to raise engagement scores. Well, the reason people are disengaged, not engaged, is because we're all disconnected and we're not dealing with this root stuff at all.
And I mean, it's hard, again, not to present it that way, that this is a root issue of self-talk, and it really just has me focused again just on belief. I am talking to myself out of my beliefs. So many of them I am so unaware of. I'm unaware, and yet I keep looking and going, why does that pattern? I think that so many well-meaning, so many striving, aspiring, growing individuals, though, they're frustrated. And I say they and me. I've been that. I've been frustrated, but I'm getting the same results over here. And I will say, and ask you about this, I will say that there's been some areas where I've found out, okay, you got me, I got me. Here's a problem. And yet it's not always, I guess that's why we get your book and work through it. It's not always so easy to just be, oh, that's the problem. I mean, that's the self-talk problem. So I hear this, I must be doing it poorly. I'm not even aware. I don't know. We're kind of back to like the emotions. And we don't even know what is the elephant that's going on.
Yeah. I mean, you can always have Marianne come into your company and she'll help you figure that out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, listen, and there's a chapter in the book, the very last chapter is, find your guide. I mean, it is very hard to do this stuff alone. Self-awareness, it's like you're trying to, without looking in a mirror, you're just trying to figure out like what's going on. And, whether it's a leader, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a good friend, it's just somebody that you trust, that could sort of guide you through some of this as well. Because you kind of can't do it fully on your own.
Well, thank you for pulling that out, because I had a client this last week going on, just giving me these accolades. Kevin, you're so good at seeing, and it was being able to see her and pull this stuff out. Yeah. And I'm sitting, and I did tell her, because I was sitting there thinking, I wasn't able to do this for myself.
None of us can. Yeah. We all need a coach. We all need a guide. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an important part, that we're talking about something that's so ingrained in us that we probably have been so unaware of. It feels really important to highlight that the chances are, not that we have to put it to a percentage, but there's only so far. I think about that. I think about it tangibly. Like I just cannot, don't get into mirrors and whatnot. Without that, I just can't see my back. I cannot see it. I can't see the back of my head right now. I just can't see.
That's right.
If there's bird poop in the back of I can't see it. I can't see my back after my last wreck. I can't even reach certain areas of my back. I can't do it. I got to get help. That is key with this, because it's just, it's so ingrained in us. I mean, gosh, you mentioned AA. I mean, that's how much a part is that the success of AA is being with people that understand and can help you.
Absolutely.
A sponsor.
Yeah, that's it. You're right. That's it. And somebody that's going to call you out, and, it's not that you want a cheerleader that's just going to say everything is great. You want a champion, not a cheerleader. So you want somebody who is going to, with the fullness of love and trust and respect, but be able to call out those things that you cannot see yourself, because we're all in the eye of our own hurricane funnel, all of us. And the perspective inside the hurricane funnel is very different than the perspective outside the hurricane funnel. We all have that.
Maybe that's what we need. You need to license self-talk sponsors. We all need one.
Yeah.
I get you. So I get the best deal here. I am grateful. I'm grateful for your heart and your message. I will put this all in the intro, but obviously the book is self-talk. Where else would you want people to connect with you?
If they go to my website, mariannerenner.com/self-talk. Okay. Here's what everybody will get. Free chapters right away. So even if you're still on the fence, by the way, you can start reading the book right away, free chapters. You can get the workbook. It has got every tool that's in the book is in the workbook. And let me tell you, there are dozens and dozens and dozens. So you can just get that for free. And a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you go to that /self-talk page, you're going to get a ton of resources.
Well, thank you. I think we joked at the beginning of doing a second show. There are some topics that we could go deep with on this. I'm especially enamored with belief and the self-talk that comes out, and just our unawareness, my unawareness, even in becoming aware. Sometimes I feel like the more aware I become, the more I'm aware of my unawareness.
Yeah. I think that's actually a good sign.
Okay, well, good, because I'm there.
And that's right. I mean, listen, it's like if you don't have awareness that you're unaware, how are you going to change? If you don't have awareness about that, you're not going to change anything. It's like if I have dirt under the rug in the kitchen and I don't know it's there, I'm never going to clean it out.
Well, again, thank you for what you're doing here. And I do appreciate the book and the candor and the humility and the stories that help the aspects hit home. I'm honored.
Listen, Kevin, I'm so honored. I was so privileged to have the most amazing person write the most amazing foreword to this book. So Kevin wrote the foreword to this book, and I am humbled beyond belief. It's the word humble is so overused in today's world, but I really feel that way and honored. So thank you.
I feel the same way, and we'll toast paying it forward for Dan Miller within that as well.
Yeah.
Marianne, thanks. I'm honored to share the message. I'm mostly honored to call you friend. Thank you.
Right back at you. I feel the same way. Thank you, Kevin.
Friends, again, that is Marianne Renner. The book, our muse for this discussion, is called Self-Talk. You can pre-order it now. Self-Talk, 10 stories you tell yourself that hold you back and how to overcome them. And as I said in the intro, if you'll go to mariannerenner.com/self-talk, you can actually get the first 3 chapters of the book totally free. Got a question for myself or for Marianne? I'm in contact with her almost daily. Let me know. Find me at kevinmiller.co or just email me at kmiller@kevinmiller.co. I truly hope this episode helps you drive further, and most of all, enjoy the ride.
Yeah.